Hi everyone, it's Niamh here and welcome to my art journaling channel. Today we're going to be just going with the flow in my Use It Up journal. So for a lot of you who've sort of asked about my Use It Up journal, this is what it is. You can see in the background here, there's a black page where I've been testing some paint pens out on it. And this is just what I do. This is a night where I didn't know what I was doing. I was watching something dreadful on Netflix in the background, and it was just me playing around with what I had in the back near me. So I had some of these new Paper Artsy paints and Paper Artsy stencils, and I was just mucking around basically, just adding and adding and adding until I was happy with it. It goes through a few different stages, I have to admit. Some pages I was like, oh yeah, I like this, and it's like, no, that's dreadful, just keep adding. And that's what I mean about going with the flow. Particularly on pages like this, it doesn't really matter because it was a mess to begin with, and if you muck it up, well, you muck it up, and you can always add something over the top, or if you really hate it, stick something over the top. So you can see on the page before, and that's another page I've got somewhere on my channel to show you, that it was just a mess of colours in the background which I've just stenciled over, and that's basically all I'm doing this page too. I'm just adding colour. I'm not really thinking about the colours I'm using because I had like all the colours in the background anyway. So I'm just adding in different bits and pieces until I'm happy. And I find these sorts of pages are a great way to break out new products, new materials. You can see that was a new stencil I was using, because I can just test it out, see how it works, see if I like it or not. And if I don't, that's great. Or it sort of helps me work out the kinks and tricks of stencils or a particular products before I actually use it on a page that I'm really passionate about. So, you know, some stencils have things leak underneath them, so you have to stencil them in a particular way. So it's good to learn that on a page like this rather than, you know, in the middle of your absolutely fabulous artwork that you really don't want to ruin and then something happens. So I'm just going over with some white. Now I've got some turquoise, just adding in some different and mixing in the little bit of white I had. You can see I'm not changing my sponge either, so I'm going to get a slightly lighter, more opaque coverage to what I'm doing. And I was just, I think, trying to hide up some of that yellow that was up there. So this is how I get these pages in my Use It Up journal, by just using up the paint that I've got. So I've got another interesting page. I don't know what I'm going to do with this page. It's actually still in my journal. I haven't used it yet, so that might be my challenge this week to break into it. So I obviously had a lot of white left there, so I'm just going back in and finishing off. I really like this stencil. It's a little bit unusual, so I can't remember where I got it from though. I'll have to look up where it's from. So I've just got that really cool half-tone dot pattern on it. So after I'd done that, I was like, yeah, okay, you've got a lot of colour there, but it's really, really random. What are you going to do? So I decided I was going to stamp over the top of it. So this is a new Tracy Scott stamps from Paper Artsy that I got when I was at her class recently, and I figured why not just put these over the top. So I'm stamping them out in the black, and up close I can actually see them. The shine of the ink is actually making it look like it hasn't stamped out properly, but in reality it is actually quite clear. It's just the shine, because the archival ink, I was going to call it distress ink, is oil based, so that's the shine you can see is the oil in the ink. So it's a good idea to do what I'm doing now and actually dry it off in between, just to make sure that nothing's going to bleed. Not bleed, sorry, smudge. So what I wanted to do to pop this out from the page was to doodle over the top using the paint pens. So I'm going back in with a white first of all to sort of highlight the shapes, and you can see already that sort of starts bringing the page together just by adding that little bit of white onto the page. It suddenly brings the stamping into focus and just gives your eye somewhere to rest, which is what white space is all about. I know those people who've followed my channel for a while know that I have a running battle with white space. But in all honesty, white space doesn't mean, you know, just leaving a white area on your page. It can also mean going back in and adding some white or somewhere for your eye to rest. Even if I'd done those white lines in a different color, that would be considered white space. It's just somewhere that your eyes can rest and make sense of what's happening on the page, basically. So the good thing about Stacey's stamps are they're really great for doing this sort of work. It's kind of like draw your own mandalas with template to help you follow it out, which is really good. So you can go in with these with any sort of colors. The paint pens are fantastic because it's acrylic paint, but it's in a very convenient form, so it makes it a lot easier to work with. You'll notice I'm working in my Small Dilutions journal, and at the front of all her journals she does have an envelope which sort of sticks out past where the pages are. Now that's to sort of carry all your collage stuff and bits and pieces in. I've never used my journal or my envelope, but I do use it, as you can see, to prime my pens when I'm working. It's just this really great little space off to the side that you can try your pens out, make sure they're working before you put them onto your page. So the paint pens I'm using here are the ones from Jane Davenport, her new Storytime paint over pens. They're lovely pens. They're not quite as opaque as the Posca paint pens, which does frustrate me somewhat, but they're in slightly different colours as well. So you can always go over once they're dried with it again just to get something slightly more opaque. In this case it didn't really matter because it sort of helped, you know, show what was going on in the background as well. So it was just to add a little bit more consistent or uniform colour, I suppose, over the page rather than the randomness of the background. So I'm going in now with one of the pink paint pens from Jane Davenport as well, just adding some of those colours. So you can sort of see the greens, the blues, the pinks. I'm picking up the colours I've stenciled on the background. They're obviously different shades, but it's sort of blending in with what I had in the background. Because they're slightly darker than the colours in the background, it sort of stands out, but it doesn't look odd on the page. If I'd used, I don't know, a yellow or maybe a deep red or something, it might look a bit odd on the page because I didn't have those colours in the background. So just sort of go with the flow with what you're doing, see if it works. And the great thing is, if you don't like it, you can always paint over it or change the colour or do something with it, or, you know, that's where you stick your focal image over the top after you've finished. So now I'm going around the outside and just adding in some of my own lines, and that's what I talked about, sort of these stamps being good as a basis of mandalas, because you've got those lovely centres. Then you can go back in over the top and add more lines. So on here I'm adding some little spiky lines, some loopy lines on top of the ones that I've just done with green. I'm going to go back in and add some loopy lines as well, or scallops I suppose, depends what you call them. So just drying off in between and going in and highlighting some of the flowers as well. And you can sort of see, just going back in with that white immediately pops those flowers off the page and it makes them stand out from the background. And that's what it's sort of all about, going back in and seeing what you want to highlight, what you want to hide and retreat into the background. So that's where those things like using the detail at the end with the white pen or a black pen is so important. It seems like a really minor thing, a last minute thing, but it actually just finishes off the piece. So if you're ever feeling that a piece doesn't feel finished, maybe think about, you know, can I add some white or black to this in some way? Even just little dots on it can sometimes make the difference to what you're doing. The final thing I was going to add on was, while I liked it, it still to me just looked like a background. I needed a focal image, so I chose to use some words. And the words I'm using are from Scrap FX. So they've just released some new rice papers. They're a bit like the Dina Wakley collage tissues, except these are made out of rice paper rather than on tissue paper. They work the same way. They go just as translucent as you can see here. So you just use put your matte medium in the background and then just glue them down, preferably straight, and then just dry them off. They do have a little bit more tooth than the collage papers, and they don't go as translucent, but they work perfectly. So just to finish it off, I'm going in and just putting a little bit of a shadow around the letters just so they pop out of the page a little bit more. And that's basically the page done. It was a simple page to do. It was a very mindless page to do. I didn't have to think about it, which I really liked. I was just doing it in the background. As something was playing, I was just doodling along in the background. But it was a really great way to sort of try out new tools, new stamps, and all the different things that I had hanging around. So thank you so much for watching. If you're new to here, please think about subscribing, hitting the like button. Above, I've got my subscribe button. I've got some videos to the side that you might like to click on too, of different things that you can see in my channel. Until next time, bye for now.